Um, because our time is very brief, I think I probably have, another, can I take another 5 minutes?
Please do, sir. Please do. Thank you
Okay.
so much. Thank
Yeah,
you.
so I was thinking, that this idea of an African indigenous, methodology or method of knowledge production is much more important than the all the whole kind of methodological issues we've been addressing that draws from Western epistemology, but also that doesn't account for African conditions. Um, so over the last 2 years, I've been involved in some research and survey in Nigeria with a team from the University of Chicago. And I think because my team is coming from a social science perspective, political science and economics, and myself coming from history, that has helped and in many ways in terms of framing the questions, the survey questions we're asking people, and understanding the nuances that do not, may not be used, easily discernible from somebody coming from the outside the environment. So that is what I think is very critical in terms of understanding that people matter, place matter, and what I mean place here is the context. And there are also some expectations when you do research in a particular place. How do we account for those expectations? Expectations are not just material things. They also involve, understanding that, people's lives and the way they order their lives may be different from, the Western conception of time, place, and allocation of time. And of course, it's important to think about data processing strategies. If the local people are not able to understand the process through which the information is processed, then that's not going to give you something that takes into account the African condition. Our understanding of ethics in the West is also different from how Africans understand ethics and its use and how it can apply to research. So it's important, I think, for us to begin to think about, some of the methods that may be useful in and appropriate for African research. And those sort of methodological issues are very critical. One is, what kind of research designs are appropriate. There are scholars who have looked at so many of these, they've come up with African research methodology, ARM, using African techniques and activities to understand particular phenomena. And there are others who have looked at what they call indigenous research methodology, which values indigenous techniques and activities. And also understanding research from sort of the philosophical basis of many African societies. Such broad approaches like Ubuntu, for example, people have come up with Ubuntu research approach, applying the principle of Ubuntu, which means, community, individuals are as important as the community, or they are important because they're members of the community. So when you come to my village to study the nature of political institutions, you're not studying one individual and the individual giving you his or her version of that. The community is important, and how those sort of ideas you present relate to community understanding is very critical. So also it's important to think about, what we may call community-centered approach. Sometimes you do research, from the West, you have no opportunity to go back and change things. People have come up with Sankofa, which means looking back. You look back at your sources you fetched, and then learning from the past. The past has meaning for African culture. It has meaning for history. it has meaning for philosophy, it has meaning for identity. And to project knowledge and produce new knowledge, we need to reintegrate the past and African understanding of that past in our knowledge production strategy. So I know there's going to be questions. Maybe I'll leave this to, those questions. I was supposed to speak to also the issue of grant writing, but I don't know. I don't have a lot of time, but I think the issue of grant writing for a center, I'll take 2 minutes here. For a center like the Obu-Kalo Center is very critical and important. And for those who are involved in seeking grants, there are basic procedures and processes that one takes in terms of making a successful grant application. One is that often we need to follow the funding guidelines. To a large extent, you review grants, you see that people want a 5-page narrative, somebody's writing 7 pages narrative. That actually already knocks you off. When they have 10,000 applications, that basically eliminates you. So you have to follow the guidelines, understand what the granting agency wants, understand, what they fund, understand the means and process of submitting your application, and you prepare a narrative outline that I think is in line with the guidelines. For a center like, Obu-Kalo Center, grant writing should be a collective a project. So if you have somebody who is interested, who is the head of a grant writing project, this should be something that will involve every member or a collection of members at the center, so that you have an initial meeting to think about how appropriate the grant is for the center, how to prepare the required, narrative. And that meeting will give you guidelines in terms of how to do your, budget, how to write your narrative, how to prepare the basic and required attachments, and to make sure that what you're submitting is what is required, no more, no less. And then you review and submit your grant. So I think I'm going to leave it so that we have time for questions, which I think will be much more useful than all the talk that I'm talking. All right, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you very much. That was very, very, very helpful. A number of questions actually revolved around grant writing. One of many questions. But before I deal with the questions on the registration form, does anyone want to unmute and ask Professor Korieh questions directly before we go to those questions? Is there anyone? Or would you prefer that we start with the questions on the registration form? Okay.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Okay, so one of the questions was, how can we write proposals that will attract funding?
Okay. I think that's I think that's one of the most important, critical things. I think to attract funding, you have to know that the grant writing process is a very competitive process, and that you are competing with so many people, and that there are also basic criteria that you need to take into consideration to write a successful grant. One way to think about that perhaps is to get, first of all, getting the right attitude. Because sometimes you may be a junior researcher, you may be a junior scholar, and you think, okay, this grant, I'm not going to be able to get it. This is too big for me. You may be a research center, and then you think, okay, I'm not going to be able to compete with all these universities and stuff like that. I think, first of all, is getting the right attitude. And the right attitude means, convince yourself that if you follow the guidelines and if you start writing your grant on time, if you follow the procedure, that you have a better chance of getting a grant. So the right attitude, I think, is very important. So second is moving beyond, the myth that grants are impossible to get. You got to move beyond the myth that this is way beyond what I can do. The other one, of course, the next one is to think about using the right vocabulary and tools when you write grants. Because grants are not just a simple narrative. You don't write grants as if you're writing a thesis proposal. Those are quite different. So you have to understand the right vocabulary. You have to understand the right tools. And you have to use language that reinforces the claim you are making. The most important, or the next important thing, is to identify institutional goals. What does the funding agency fund? If you're writing a grant for Rockefeller Foundation, they're funding development projects, then you're submitting a grant that is not related to that theme. The chances are you're not going to be successful. So you must identify institutional goals. You must then also identify the goal of your own institution, like the center. The goal is, Christianity broadly in Africa, African culture. That is important in terms of locating grants that will fit into your own goal and your own institutional objectives. Then the idea then within your own institution is to form a theme that would be critical in terms of putting these ideas into paper. Then second is finding funding sources. That's not easy. Some institutions will have departments that have all the skills and competencies to locate appropriate funds that you may apply. And you have to be, for a center like the Obukalu Center, that's going to be part of the critical engagement with the outside world and funding agencies. Somebody has to be looking at this funding and finding things that are appropriate. The other one is to think about when you outline your proposal. This is very important. When the call is made, often they may give you things that are required in the proposal. That includes all the parts of the proposal. It may have an abstract. If they say the abstract is 150 or 50 words, don't go beyond 50 words. It may have a narrative, it may have a significance, it may have budget, you have to present your funding proposal according to the outline, or ensuring that all the right parts are included. Perhaps one of the most important aspects of funding and successful funding is writing the narrative. Most funding requests would request some form of narrative. Writing the narrative is probably the most critical and important thing. So it means you have to develop a succinct writing style that somebody who is not in your field should be able to read and understand, excluding jargons that do not add meaning to what you're trying to say. I think this is one of the greatest problems that you have, not just for funding, but also publications and proposals from students, is the challenge of writing a narrative that is succinct, that is clear, that's jargon-free. This is perhaps where people need to pay attention. Next is often grant agencies will require a methodology. They want to know whether you are able to, if they give you a grant, whether you're going to be able to carry out that grant. What is the methodology you're going to be using? And how is that methodology designed? So that would mean looking at the form of research that they fund. Is it an action-based research? And if that is the case, how is your methodology going to give data or conclusions that is actionable? So if somebody, for example, is calling for a proposal on peace and conflict and how to resolve peace and conflict, and you write a methodology that does not provide how your result can be used to implement a peace process, then it's not going to be successful. Last is to think about the budget. The budget is very critical. If the budget maximum is 50,000, don't think if your budget is 10,000, they're going to fund you. They may think your budget is not going to be able to carry out the research. So your budget must be appropriate. It must, be very clear in terms of how the money is going to be applied. And then finally, think about, how you bring all this together and how you plan, sustainability. In fact, basically like going for the stars. And when you have all this reviewed, don't submit it the last day that is due. Have time to submit, read this, let other people review it, and then you'll be able to submit something that you think will be meaningful. Yeah, I know I've gone too long, but anyway.
No, thank you so much for that very detailed answer. It's actually tackled quite a number of questions. The other questions that were submitted in the registration form. Another question that came out was how to build credibility for research grants as a beginner, but I think you tackled that. But how to also acquire research grants for PhD research?
Mm-hmm. I think it depends. It depends on where you are located. And that's sort of the problem that we have with the sort of educational system and the sort of inequality that you find in the system between the North and the South. So most universities in the United States, for example, would fund a PhD program. Most universities in Europe may fund a PhD program, you don't have the same, possibility in most cases in Africa. So most people fund themselves, and that sometimes presents a challenge. But there are also a lot of bodies that offer research money for people who are doing, doctoral programs in particular. So fellowships are possible. Um, you know, small grants are possible. It's important to sort of look out for those opportunities. Some of them, would appear in particular databases or listserv, and I know, like in a place like the University of Nigeria, the Public Relations Office and the Grant Office publishes this and sends out email, for available funds and funding. So, and you have hundreds of these, coming up every month or so, offering opportunity for graduate students in Europe, and mostly in Europe. So I think those are the kind of places people should look into. I know if you're not in the university system, you may not have access to those, but things like HNet, also offer opportunities that students may be able to tap into.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. A very interesting question also came up. It says, what roles does emerging technology such as artificial intelligence play in shaping the future of grant writing and research funding, especially with our beloved ChatGPT?
Okay, this is something new. I mean, this is something new, and I think I wouldn't say I am the most competent to do this now, but there's also some ethical issues involved. I mean, as this technology evolves, in terms of you're putting up a grant or you're writing a grant, and you are relying on AI to structure and do the narratives for you. I'm not sure the extent to which that can help in terms of budgeting and stuff, but I think one has to consider the ethical issues involved when you do research, just like you do consider other ethical issues, just as you consider plagiarism and other things in scholarship. So this is an emerging area. I don't think I have a lot of knowledge and information in how this may influence grant writing in the future. But I can assure you that um, the debate is already emerging in terms of for example, people in the creative arena. If AI can be used to write scripts, for example, for people in the media, I mean, acting and film industry, then that means that you can also use AI to generate a narrative that can be used for funding. How that is going to be accepted, or the ethical nature of that, I think is something that is still going to be there. If it's not, if it's not, your knowledge that is producing this, I think those are going to be concerns in the future.
All right, thank you so much. In the chat, there was another question by one of the participants. He said he has been awakened by the indigenous or African methods of inquiry. Could you please suggest materials one can consult for further studies?
Okay, so yeah, I mean um, there are a couple of writings that have been done in terms of looking at different methodological approaches. There is, for example, if you're looking at participatory action research, if you're looking at African-centered or Afrocentric research, Bangura 2020, published in 2021. I can actually send this to your email in terms of some sources that may be useful. African research methodology, there's READ, there's CUBE and CAN. And those, I think, for example, educational research for social change towards an African education research methodology. And you have some of those also in the social sciences. Or if you look at the website, africasocialwork.net.research, that explains a lot of these methodological issues and the sources that may be useful to you in that case.
All right, thank you so much. Please, we would appreciate the link. Yes, like you said, then we would post it under the videos when we post it on our website and our Facebook and social media pages. The
Great.
other, I think we can take is one more time. Let me ask all the participants, do you want to unmute and ask a question directly? I have just one more question from the registration form. So does anybody want to unmute and speak before I round up with that last question?
Yes, I think I've unmuted.
Okay, yes, sir, you have. Thank you.
Okay. And I must appreciate the opportunity to share in this webinar. It's been quite helpful. Among the things we have this, I want to ask, how can we know the areas of interest? And how can we know when there will be calls for proposals or for articles? Some of us are completely new on the activities of the center. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we can. I can hear you.
Yeah, I think they are important, databases and listservs that publish these. And there are also some funding agencies where, they call for paper annually. For example, the African Center for Peace or something. If you're interested, writing a project on peace and conflict issues in Africa, the call comes out every year. At least first quarter of the year, and that has been the case for the last couple of years. And if you're interested in that kind of area, you can get as much as $15,000 to conduct, research and in any area of peace and conflict. And there are also, of course, those that are depending on where you are located. There are opportunities that are open to people from all over the world. There are opportunities that are open to Africans. There are opportunities that are close to Africans, depending on where you are. But a lot of these opportunities, are in, there's a lot of them in Europe that is open to Africans. I think what the center can do is on the website, if there's the website is going to be probably an important way to not only publicize the work of the center, but also to, provide opportunity for people who are interested in the center to see funding opportunities. And if this is linked to the center's website, whenever there's a call for paper, then people can always have it. And also, if it's possible to build a listserv for people who are interested in the center's activity, when there's a call, it can be then shared on the listserv so that if you're on that list, you can always know that there's a call for paper, there's a call for conference participation, there's a call for funding opportunity. That, I think, is one way in which those of us who do not always have access can be reached, through your email. But the center has to probably develop a listserv that, anyone interested in the center's activity and other things can be can be made aware of what is going on. Yeah, and then look at things like, if you want to subscribe to things like H Africa, for those in the humanities, there's the HNet has so many areas. There's there's listserv for people in various areas, so you can subscribe to those. They are free, but you get updates every week about funding, events, jobs, book reviews, and call for papers. That is one way in which you can keep abreast of what is going on in your own area, because that sort of gives you global connection and outreach, a global reach.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. We also have Jason Mbila's hand up. So, sir, would you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you very much for elaborating and enabling us to understand better some of the things that we did not understand. One of my question is, when we are talking about grants, with those who have grants, do they also have motives? Motives in terms of wanting you to write in a particular way, as it were, in terms of the proposal to qualify, and therefore conditioning you in the guidelines that they write, that you look at the guidelines and you know that you are conditioned. If you don't do it this way, you are unlikely to get the grants. And that will then, as it were, stifle objectivity. Have you come across that? You can guide us on that.
Yeah, Mr. Johnson. I think this is a very important issue. When I mean, they say who pays the piper, right? Dictates the tone. This is I think what is critical about adopting methodology and funding certain kinds of knowledge and and pushing knowledge production towards a particular direction. So, and that's the politics of knowledge production. And it's not just open to, it's not something that Africans confront. It's also people, all over, scholars all over the world confront. If, for example, you are interested in a particular area or theme that is funded by, sort of a conservative, agency, they're not going to fund activities that they deem very liberal in terms of their goals. So you are very unlikely to get funded for a project that does not align with the goals of the funding agency. And I think that's just the bottom line. Now, it's possible that your grant, when you write your goals, you indicate what your goals are. You indicate what your methodology is. Now, if you have a grant that is funding, say you want to do research in the humanities, and it does not specify the particular topic, their interest will be to see how your research furthers the goal of humanities, then you have flexibility in terms of how you may craft your proposal. There are others that are very restrictive in terms of what they want to fund. I had mentioned the one on peace and conflict. If your proposal is one in which you're advocating a particular sort of research that is going to be inimical to their conception of peace, then the chances that you're going to be funded is zero. They may be interested in terms of how do you have, or how would you use sort of indigenous peace-making strategies to resolve a particular conflict. If they are interested in that area, and then your research falls into that area, then the chances are you're going to be funded. If you're advancing something that is not indigenous way of thinking about peace and conflict resolution, then the chances are you're not going to be funded. So, my brother, that is what I was saying earlier in terms of knowledge production. We are not just influenced by the fact that many African societies and institutions do not have the resources to fund research work in Africa, and that those fundings mostly coming from Western societies, they have a lot of control in terms of what you can use their funds for and the kind of knowledge they want you to produce. That's the dilemma that we face. I'll tell you, when I was doing my PhD many years ago at the University of Toronto, I was interested in, okay, how do I get money to go to Nigeria to do research from Canada? I could pursue my interest in understanding post-abolition problems in Africa, in Nigeria or in Africa, or I could write a grant to look at, contemporary political economy in Nigeria, and then get funding from Rockefeller Foundation. So, I switched to the state and agricultural sustainability, and I got funded from Rockefeller to go to do research work. But if I had funding for the other area of interest, maybe I would have preferred to go there. But sometimes you're looking at the money in order to decide what you are going to produce or what you're going to write and how that is going to influence knowledge and knowledge production.
Thank you so much, sir. We do have one final question, even though we've had a lovely session and we've run out of time. However, we have Francisca OKCCAC who wants to ask a question. Madam?
Yes.
Madam Francisca, are you there?
She's muted.
Yes. Can you unmute and speak before we round up? Okay. Sir, would it be okay if I post your email address in the chat box? Or do you want the email, the inquiries to come through us and then we send them to you? Which would be more preferable?
It's fine. Whatever works better for you, that's fine.
Okay. Okay. So just in case anyone else has any other questions, I will post the email addresses in the chat box. So please use them so you can continue to communicate about this fascinating topic. Professor Kalu, would you want to round up the meeting? And hopefully.
Thank you very much. It's been a wonderful webinar. We would like to continue it. We'll probably have a part 2. of this and go into some of the issues a little bit more, would really appreciate it. I'm sure everybody will appreciate it. One of the questions that was asked, I was amused about the AI, ChatGPT and all that one. It is okay to use it, but I just want to, I'm in education, self-education. So I always tell people, don't cheat your brain. Don't cheat yourself. The critical thinking is your inheritance. Don't waste it by having ChatGPT. If you get into a lot, a confusion, and you say, oh, I would like to see how another person will put this information better, then you can use ChatGPT at that point. Because when you use critical thinking, everybody who is in academics or research knows you are sleeping, blink, the light will go on. The idea will rearrange itself. Something will come up. That is the joy, the aesthetic value of writing and research and things like that. So don't cheat yourself. Don't cheat yourself. Okay. Thank you people so very much.
Yeah.
And we thank Professor Korieh for coming. We would have another session next time. Please check up on our website. We would be interested in what you are doing, and you can send us more information. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a blessed evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Korieh. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Or have a wonderful
You too.
afternoon,
Thank you.
rather.
Yes. It's afternoon here.
Yeah.
Okay, so is Johnson Mbila from Rwanda?
I am from Ghana.
Oh, okay,
Ghana,
okay.
from Afrofikistula Institute.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I had a great time in Ghana. I brought some students to Ghana a couple of years ago. I've been trying to do it again. It's not been possible, So there's not been a lot of interest because I teach in a university where the African program is very small, and then you don't get a lot of students who are interested in West Africa, So most are interested in Europe. But I look forward to coming to Ghana once more. Really, I enjoyed my stay in Ghana. Yeah.
Try again. You may be able to come. I worked in the University of Toronto in the Emmanuel College for some time as a visiting lecturer, but for a very short time. So when you mentioned Toronto, then I remember that I was there some years.
Oh.
Yeah. But try again. You'll be very welcome if you're able to come to Ghana. Really very welcome.
Thank you.